Good afternoon, SLAE family. I am super excited to be here today, and we are going to go on a journey. That's what I'm going to declare today is. We have a very special guest today who is just one of the most poetic speakers I've ever met, and you'll understand that in a few minutes. But she has a background in yoga, and she is an entrepreneur, and she has a business that is just a gift to people. I've never heard of anything like it. And when I heard about it, I was so excited and fascinated. I wanted to bring her in here, not only to share with us what she does, but just a lot of things that will help bring some peace and tranquility to us. And I think we could all use that nowadays. So with no further ado, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest at SLAE today, and that is Dagmar Bulman. So Dagmar, can you please take a minute and share your background and a little bit about what you do, please?
First of all, thank you so very much for hosting me and bringing me on board with your wonderful group. I appreciate that so much, because I do believe that what I do is to create a ripple effect of spreading the news that spending more time outside is not just good for our own inner nature, but it's also good for outer nature. Because why would we care about our surroundings if we wouldn't have an intimate relationship with them? So I grew up in Germany, and as a single mom, my mom didn't have a whole lot of time working to take care of me after school. So it was really the woods that raised me. I would spend time with my cohort of the same age, between 8 and 14, and we would roam the woods in the rolling hills in Western Germany, very close to the border to Eastern Germany. So I felt really safe when I would go hunting for tadpoles and raising them in my home. And I would also feel safe just hiking through the trails, getting lost and finding my way back home, and sometimes staying out until it was after dark. And that was my childhood, and it was something that I still draw from when I feel a little out of sorts. I go in the woods and I sort things out there. But in the meantime, of course, how did I get from Germany to here, right? In a long stroke, I studied North American studies, went to Canada to do an internship with a television station there, and kind of stayed, and loved hiking wherever I was, because with my 2 feet and the slower pace of walking, I think you discover more and you feel more at home wherever you walk than if you just do a drive-by. So there I also started to learn how to lead groups as a group fitness instructor. That was now more than 25 years ago. And a few stops on the road later, here I am now in Baltimore, north of Baltimore, in the rolling hills of Northern Maryland. And I have now combined my love with hiking and my love for group exercise by leading yoga hikes. So that's what I do. 5 years ago, with a friend of mine, Kimberly Strom, I started a company with the intention to empower women to get out in the woods and feel comfortable there by walking for 10 minutes, stopping for 10 minutes. We alternate that. 90 minutes is the experience, and everybody leaves with, my intention is to let everybody leave 10% happier than when they started.
It sounds like more than 10%, I think. So you're combining yoga and hiking, which is such an interesting thing. How long is a yoga hike? How long does that take usually?
So it takes 90 minutes, more or less. And we alternate 10 minutes of hiking and 10 minutes of yoga. And the intention is, during the hike, you have the ability to talk with one another and create a sangha or community. And goodness, during our isolation of the last year and a half, we all needed that, a place where we could congregate together and feel safe. The groups during that time were small, just 10 people. So we could leave the 6 feet in between us, but we still were able to communicate with one another. However, if, as you probably know, when you go for a walk with a friend, sometimes you arrive back at the car and you don't even realize where you went, because 80% of your conversation, your conversation took up 80% of your attention. So then during the 10 minutes of the yoga stop, we use simple yoga poses, just standing yoga poses, no mat required, to allow us to get really rooted down into the ground amongst the trees. And when we raise our arms up and we raise our eyes up, we see the limitlessness of the sky above us. So it's a very different sensation than when you are on the rectangular yoga mat in the very predictable rectangular yoga room. So leaving the studio behind opens us up to more than there is. And we find that the stillness in the forest, the sound of the birds, maybe the gurgling of the stream, and the wind in the leaves, those are the sounds that soothe our soul.
Yes.
And as we connect with all our senses, we feel the calmness, the serenity of the woods enter us. And then we pick up the pace again and pick up our conversation and pick up our heart rate, only to do this again. And then depending on where we're at, we might take 10 minutes to sit down, maybe leaning the back against the tree, maybe sitting on a rock, and we're getting calm. And I typically enter that phase of a meditative state through some guided invitations, like maybe pick up an acorn and really examine it. Does it feel warm or cold? Is it heavy or is it light? Does it look perfect or imperfect? Or is there, in that imperfection, is it perfect? And then maybe we can see something that we hold in our hands as something that's inside of us, like that strength of that acorn that grows into this 900-year-old tree. Maybe that is inside of us as well. And if we don't have time to sit down, then those 10 minutes would turn into a silent walk. And I have to tell you that I still remember this gentleman who came along on a yoga hike, and he said in the share afterwards that the first 3 minutes of that yoga hike were the hardest when during that calm place, because his mind was not calm and it didn't want to be reined in. But then the following 7 minutes were the best. So it's all about practicing, right? And I always say your mind has a job, and that is to think. Just like your heart has a job, and that is to beat. So it's very normal that there are a lot of thoughts just coming through. And when we get quiet, we then notice as that witness that how much thinking we actually do. In fact, somebody has counted it, between 50,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
No.
I know I'm at the higher end. This is an average, of course, but most of those thoughts aren't genius new thoughts. They are thoughts we already had again and again and again. We ruminate around the same stuff, or we plan the same stuff, and the thoughts go in circles. But by the sheer act of walking, we can stretch out those circles and gain more clarity. So it's kind of nice to just let your mind wander a little and then bring it back to the pace of your feet, the sound of your feet against the crunchy leaves, maybe the sound of your breath as your breath pulls in the oxygen that the trees just exuded for you. And as you exhale, you enter that reciprocal relationship with the trees. You exhale the carbon dioxide that the trees and the plants around you need to do their thing, their photosynthesis. So it's a lovely combination of stillness and talk, of walking and standing and stretching the body in ways that the trees might stretch. So that's what it is.
This is why, Dagmar, I called you poetic, because you have a way of describing things that is so fabulous. Like, I feel peaceful listening to you talk about the leaves crunching in the air and all of that. And I can, just listening to you, understand what a distinct difference there would be between being in a studio with the lights and the walls versus going outside. So if somebody wanted to do something like this, particularly with your company, if they happen to be local, do they need experience? Do they have to have a certain amount of yoga training? Could they know nothing and come participate? How does that work for them?
So my intention is to make this accessible to all. So I have a designated intensity level for the different hikes that we do. Okay. There are, let's start on the saunter side of things. I also offer Zen Walks. So those are much slower. We might only cover a half a mile instead of 2 or 3 miles. Mm-hmm. So it's very accessible to people, even if they have a hard time keeping pace. Now, if you can walk 10 minutes, you can do a yoga hike, because this is more or less the sections in which we walk. And then as we're standing still, even if you walk a little slower, you catch up with everybody else. In terms of the yoga, you don't have to have any yoga experience at all. The poses are accessible to everybody. If you can stand on 2 feet and bring your arms up over the overhead, you can do yoga. Yes. Sometimes I say, if you can breathe, you can do yoga. And there are some longer yoga XL hike. Obviously, that requires, if you need to, if you have issues with your feet or your knees, there's always help. You can use your sticks, but you need to be able to make it through like 3 hours. That would be an hour and a half of walking and an hour and a half of yoga. Those are typically once or twice a year. I offer the XL versions for those of us who want to get their sweat on, basically.
Yes. And it's interesting because, I've never done anything like it. I'm dying to come go on one of your hikes. I'm so excited to do that. But I notice that we're so bombarded electronically, whether it's whether we're working or even when we're not working, it's the phone, it's social media. It's just that there's so much coming at us that's electronic constantly, that there is so much peace in unplugging. And, sometimes we're very blessed. We have a really big back deck on the back of our house. And sometimes I just drop everything and just go sit there and look at the trees. And when you and I were chatting, you were talking about just the impact of being outside and cortisol. Can you share with everybody your knowledge on that? Because I thought that was so interesting, the way you explained it.
Yes, for sure. So just like you said, the problem is that we spend so much time indoors. Just think back a few generations when maybe your ancestors' were still working the land, bringing in the food that they ate. Mm-hmm. And then industrial revolution started, right? So suddenly we moved more into the cities and more into homes. And a couple things happened to our nervous system. Really think back when our nervous system was originally designed. We spent 99.9% of our time outside. Yes. And now we spend 87% of our times, that's the EPA study, indoors, plus 7% in cars. And that leaves, you do the math, like 6% of time to be outdoors. And that's typically the time that you spend walking from your car to your office or from the car to the shopping center. So even if you think about, that's less than an hour. And in the UK, even prisoners have to spend an hour a day outside for their mental health. So what happened during this move indoors is not only that we're losing our resilience because we're now used to just living 24/7 at 72 degrees, right? So going outside and being slightly uncomfortable, that's actually good for us. But also we see a rise in depression, a rise in anxiety, and anxiety and depression are oftentimes related to the stress in our life. And the way that we measure stress, one of the ways, is by cortisol. And we can measure that with a saliva test. There's actually research that shows that if you spend 90 minutes outside in the woods, you're going for a hike. This is a study that came out of Stanford. Your saliva level of cortisol drops so much that even 7 days later, you can still notice the drop in the stress hormone. 7 days later.
That's
So
amazing.
they tested that against a control group that was hiking not in the woods but in city streets, and they could document that the exercise itself is not what does it, but what does it is that you are surrounded by the trees. So of course they are curious to figure out what makes the difference, right? So among other things, it is the air that you breathe. It's not only filled with more oxygen, but it's
Mhm.
also filled with phytoncides. Those are like the perfumes of the woods. Yeah, when you inhale deeply through your nose and you smell the woody smell, it's even more pronounced in in the areas where there's lots of pine trees.
Yes.
And you might know about like essential oils. It's like that. It's
Mm.
the essence of the tree that the tree exudes to communicate with other trees, but also to get rid of infestations. But when we inhale it, it has a soothing quality on our parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest system. That's why my job as a guide in the woods is easy. I'm just guiding. The who really is the what really makes the difference is the woods, just inhaling that atmosphere of the forest. And that theory actually is ancient, right? I mean, bathing, the idea of using the baths goes back to the Romans. We all know that we like to be near water, near a creek or near
Yes.
a lake or near the ocean. We're drawn to that. Um, it's that there is a word for it. It's biophilia. We are also drawn towards animals. So we like to be around animals. Look at the little kids who are all carrying around beanie babies. Yeah, there is a reason. We as humans grew up in the woods with other creatures. So sometimes, especially when you feel lonely or down, it's nice to go outside. And I tell you, when I sit outside in the morning with my cup of tea in my hand and I look up in the trees, first I see nothing. Then I wait for a while and my eyes become more open and I have that soft um, gaze that makes me feel like I'm drinking it all in with my eyes. And suddenly I see and I hear the animals. The birds are coming around and I have a total of 4 little, what are they called again? Okay. The little animals that jump from one tree to another like big
Squirrels?
acrobats.
Squirrels?
Squirrels, thank you.
Okay.
Could have also been chipmunks, but they don't jump that high. So then they come and sometimes it just, you need to wait a little, you need to be quiet. And then you see how nature surrounds you and comes and visits you. And that's just an amazing feeling.
It is amazing. Now, you started running this, and you have a business called YOGAhikes, but I also understand that you, in addition to having the scheduled events, you do events for teams, for businesses, for organizations, so they can actually have you come and do an event for them. And do you just do that in Maryland? Do you do it around the Mid-Atlantic area? Tell us about that, please.
I currently are doing it in Maryland in the Baltimore County area, but I am working on teaching other yoga teachers how to do that. So I'm developing a yoga teacher training. So reach out to me if you have a yoga teacher or if you are a yoga teacher who would like to know how to do it and how to, again, create that ripple effect to bring more people in. And yes, it is really fun to do it as a birthday party, or it's great as a team building event to get out of the office and relate to each other in different ways. I'm currently partnering with a group that is a mentor charity that connects women with young girls and young women in the inner city Baltimore. They are called Sister Circle, and taking these young Black women into nature is just so heart-opening. The first time that I did it, when a 16-year-old, without being questioned, came up to me and told me after the sit spot practice, I don't remember the last time that I felt that relaxed. I thought we need more of that. We need more avenues to bring more people, more urban dwellers into nature, because this is where we can restore ourselves.
Excellent. So somebody who, if somebody's a yoga instructor or they know one, they can connect them with you. What if somebody is in another part of the country and they're watching this? Is there any way for them to find something like what you do, or connect with an organization on a scale that's not local?
So obviously you can Google yoga, hiking, and your location, and you might or might not find something there. If you're interested in forest bathing, so less yoga, more of a meditative connection to nature, there's an organization led by Amos Clifford.
Okay.
And this you can also get this book because it has a lot of these invitations that I talked about in it. But his organization has a website with links to many online resources and teachers. Wonderful. And the website is forestbathing.info. Forestbathing.info. And just to be clear, forest bathing does not mean that you have to show up in a bathing suit. It's fully clothed. it's a term.
Good
that
clarification there. Yes,
comes out of Japan. You might have heard Shinrin Yoku. This is our English translation of that term, of taking in nature through all your senses.
And if somebody is watching this and they don't live out where there's woods or there's anything beautiful, what would you tell them? Just go sit outside, go for a walk. What can they do to come close to experiencing what you create with people?
Yeah, so I've actually been asked that question by one of the inner city girls, and my answer was, does your room have a window? And if the answer is yes, if you can get yourself to a window, look up. So nature is all around us. We don't have to be in the woods. Obviously, that's ideal, but I understand that there is such a thing as environmental justice, and we don't all have the same access. In fact, if you look at any American city from above, you see the most affluent areas as green areas, and the ones that are less affluent as gray. So knowing that, depending on where you are, you can also find maybe a little house plant and just gaze at that house plant. And it seems so simple, but you will notice that if you spend some time with that plant, this plant is going to grow on you. And you'll notice details about the plant that you might not notice otherwise. And if you have a balcony, you can sit on your balcony. If you have a walk to your car or to public transportation and you pass a tree, maybe you touch that tree and you start a relationship with that tree. So it doesn't have to be the woods. Sometimes the most profound moment can happen when you're walking outside the house and to the bus or to your car, and you stop for a moment and you take your gaze up and you take a big breath. You never know what you're gonna see. Like right now in October, we are in the corridor of all the songbirds migrating south. Yes. So in the early morning or just before evening, they start to take off. You never know. So it might be worth looking up and checking the horizons to see what you can see. Let yourself be surprised.
Yes, and it's funny because even the small things you're saying, like I know so many people got dogs and pets during the pandemic, but like sometimes I'll take our dog out for a walk and I'll see the neighbors and they're on the phone while they're walking their pet, and they're not even present to what's around them. So it seems like what you're doing is, if possible, outside, but if not inside, just creating kind of a presence and an awareness and a connection. Is that pretty safe to say?
That's very safe to say. In fact, if you have a desk-bound job and you're staring at the screen, it does you well to have a house plant right next to it, so you can exchange some green for the screen.
I
Simply
like
by
that.
looking over, like even right now, as you're following this, just look up and look out. And the color green is actually in the middle of the color spectrum, so it's very easy on the eye. So you can relax your eyes from the harsh colors of the screen and gaze out and take different distances in, kind of focusing your eyes not just on that distance of the screen right in front of you that might give you a headache, but you allow your eyes to wander, and you start to just spend a few minutes looking at the many different colors of green, the shades of green. There's more than 50. And you can then look at the different shapes or the different textures that you can see outside. And that's all so healthy for the eyes and for the brain to get a little break. The author, Anne Lamott, says, everything works better if you unplug it for a while. That includes you.
That makes so much sense. Well, I really appreciate you being on here. And what I'd love to do, you're going to show up on 2 formats. We are live right now in our Facebook group, but we also have the YouTube channel. So if you would post your website below this conversation, then we'll get that into the Facebook group. And you're in the Facebook group if people would like to reach out to you. That's okay, I assume?
Absolutely. That would be so wonderful. Again, any question you have, ask me. I love to be outside. If you, I have a few app suggestions. If you want to go and hike, the app that I use in the United States is All Trails. It's a free app, and wherever you are, if you open the app, it shows you where you're at, and it gives you suggestions for hikes that where you can see the distance and the intensity level. Another app that I like is when I'm out, I love learning. So Picture This is one of the apps that you can use, and you simply snap a picture while you're in that app, and it tells you what it is that you see. So if you don't know what plant it is, use Picture This, and it gives you not only the name, but also a lot of background info on that plant. So fun.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. We'll put all that up on the YouTube channel. So if you are watching this on YouTube right now, we will have all that down in the comments below. But I encourage everybody who's watching, if you, first of all, if anyone has been lucky enough to go on one of her hikes, we'd love to hear about your experience. And for those of us who are interested, I think maybe we could do a SLAE hike. That might be kind of fun. So let's see what we have. Questions, comments, anything, feedback you have. I think, Dagmar, you're amazing. Your accent is beautiful. Your descriptions are beautiful, and that you are empowering women and giving them some tranquility, which is very needed, is such a gift. So thank you so much for being here today.